Tom Waits has recorded with at least 20 different guitarists, including himself, but his career began with very little guitar. His 1973 debut album, Closing Time, featured a bit of background picking and strumming by Shep Cooke and Peter Klimes, but neither did anything more than accompany. On the next three releases, Tom played his own scant guitar parts, and then on 77's Foreign Affairs, there was no guitar at all. It wasn't until Blue Valentine in 1978 that guitar really became a staple, and Tom had three session guys adding to his own fragmented plucking. These three guests were Alvin Robinson, Ray Crawford and Roland Bautista. Alvin Robinson had played with the likes of Dr. John, Carly Simon and Ringo Starr, and we can hear him playing those riffs on Whistling Past the Graveyard. And Ray Crawford played this beautiful solo on the title track. Now, if you want to see that solo in full, and I urge you to do so, you're going to need to click on the link and watch it separately on my channel. Because I nailed it. And YouTube's algorithm thinks it's the original recording, so I can't put it in here or it'll demonetize my entire video. But seriously, you got to check it out. It's a beautiful, beautiful guitar solo, played quite well. But more importantly, I put the tabs on it so you can play it too. Check it out. So let's talk about Ray. Born in Pittsburgh in 1924, Ray Crawford began his professional career playing tenor saxophone in Fletcher Henderson's band from 41 to 43. In an interview with Mark Webber in 1980, he said, "While I was with Fletcher Henderson's orchestra, I had tuberculosis and I had to go to a sanatorium for 2 years. That ended my scene with the saxophone and began my scene with the guitar, because that's where I learned to play guitar. When I came out of hospital, I was able to play enough to where I could play jobs. No chords, just solos." I love it. I love that. What did he care for chords? He was a saxophonist. They can't play chords. That's great. Apparently Ray liked to call himself H. Ray, and I'm guessing this was simply the initial of his middle name, Holland. Also, apparently, H. Ray could play a pretty mean B3. But then he gigged with Jimmy Smith for quite some time, so he no doubt picked up a thing or two. If you listen to his solo gear, which you can do here on YouTube or Bandcamp or other places, he played some sweet bebop jazz, and you can hear those types of lines throughout the Blue Valentine solo. Those lines over the dominant 7 chords. And he swings it too. He's just got that vibe, got that feel. H. Ray died in 1997. And our third guest, Roland Bautista, was from Earth, Wind and Fire, of course, and he would go on to put some serious grit on Tom's next album, Heart Attack and Vine. Heart Attack and Vine is one of my favourite of Tom's albums, perhaps because it was the first one I ever heard when Mum bought it for Dad after they saw him on Australia's Don Lane show back in 1981. But I see this release as the first staggering step towards his wilder, bluesier, distorted dissonance that came to characterise Tom's more popular albums later on. Tom's own playing on the title track is brilliant and incredibly hard to mimic. He's in drop D. I think he's actually got both E strings dropped to D. And he's doing something like this. Track 2, In Shades, is also a favourite of mine. It's an instrumental featuring Roland Bautista on lead and Tom doing some cool blues comping. So I think Tom's going... Roland, Tom, Roland, Tom, Roland, Tom, Roland, and then both of them. It's got these great stabs that are really tricky to count. I think you feel them rather than count them. Anyway, Roland Bautista was quite the in-demand session player. He played with some huge names like Michael Jackson, Ella Fitzgerald, B.B. King, the Pointer Sisters, Bill Withers, George Duke. Wow. And Tom. You know, he played the 12-string on Jersey Girl on this album. Brilliant. And he also contributed a notable edge to the swagger of Mr. Siegel. Swordfish trombones is where we really begin to hear the Tom Waits that many know and love. That clanking, rattling percussion coupled with angular guitar lines wrenched out of twangy, cheap-sounding guitars through tiny, grungy amps. And that is thanks to Fred Tackett. Check out his work on the opening track, Underground. Fred was in Little Feat after the astonishingly wonderful Lowell George died, but he's another guy that's played with royalty. From Dylan to Ringo, Boz Scaggs to Neil Diamond, Ricky Lee Jones to Kenny and Dolly. The list is stupendous. Fred plays on 4 tracks on Swordfish trombones, Underground, Shore Leave, the wicked live staple 16 Shells from a 30-06, and Gin Soaked Boy. All great, but go and have a listen to his playing on Shore Leave because it's menacingly appropriate for the song. Another track on Swordfish trombones, Down, 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 features someone called Carlos Guitarlos. I had to mention Carlos Guitarlos because Carlos Guitarlos was the guitarist in Top Jimmy's band. Oh, Jimmy! Rain Dogs, enter Marc Ribot. Marc Ribot has also played for such incredibly huge and cool names as Elvis Costello, Robert Plant, the Black Keys, Wilson Pickett and Elton John. But we all know him because of Rain Dogs. Definitely because of his extraordinary contributions to the album, but also because the Rain Dogs tour finally saw Tom take a guitarist out on the road with him. And that guitarist was Marc. Now there are 2 or 3 quite audible guitar parts on the opening track, Singapore, both sounding very Ribot. However, another session guitarist, Chris Spedding, is also credited on that track. So you know what I love about doing things like this? The names it uncovers that I was entirely ignorant of up until this point, like Chris Spedding. Chris only appears on that 1 track on Rain Dogs, but check out his list of accomplishments. He produced the Sex Pistols' first recordings. He played with Eno, Jack Bruce, McCartney, Brian Ferry, Roxy Music, Elton John, Ginger Baker. Played the solo on Me, Myself, I for Joan Armatrading. He played on this. That's unreal. Sorry, Chris, I'd never heard of you until today. So I'm not sure what Chris played on Singapore. The main part is surely Marc Ribot's incredible twisted take on a minor blues. But perhaps Chris played those higher pitched contra lines that come in. Anyway, back to Marc Ribot. Go and listen to Marc on Cemetery Polka. It's insane. In an interview about recording with Tom, Marc said, "I remember one verbal instruction being, play it like a midget's bar mitzvah." When I listen to Marc, I feel like he sometimes does this thing where he attacks the strings so hard, plucking with his pick or his fingers, that it makes the notes sound sharp for like just a millisecond. It's so characteristic because it fits the whole homemade, found in the shed
What's he building in there?
aesthetic. Listen to the title track for a great example of this. But Marc Ribot and Chris Spedding aren't the only guitarists on this phenomenal album. Keith Richards features most recognisably on Black Mariah and plays a similarly stonesy boogie riff on Union Square. And then on the sublime Blind Love, he's joined by Robert Quine's tasty picking as well as Tom's own strumming. But this is the thing about being a Keith Richards, someone with a thoroughly developed, world-renowned musical identity, as opposed to being a Marc Ribot. Keith isn't about to change how he plays just because he's a guest on someone else's album. Don't get me wrong, I love listening to him and Tom together. But do you reckon Tom asked Keith to change anything? Do you think he went, nah, Keith, play it more like a midget's bar mitzvah? Nah, but when Tom and Marc or Fred or Joe Gore get together in the studio, they change each other. Robert Quine, by the way, a quirky genius from the New York punk scene, also played on another of this great album's high points, Downtown Train. Although I'm certain it's G.E. Smith who plays this beautiful melodic hook and the other lead parts. When I see you tonight. It's just got that pop sensibility from the guy who played this. Yeah, G.E. Smith. We all know who that guy is. Hall & Oates, Jagger, Buffett, even played with Dylan. Marc Ribot also opens Tom's 1987 release, Frank's Wild Years, with even more outrageous, almost tuneless wonderment. His main riff on the opening track is played through a ring modulator, adding random overtones on the verge of cacophony. But then his second guitar comes in, and it's equally as edgy because Marc leans on the whammy bar as he's picking and playing. He's making his twangy lines sound psychotically nerve-wracking. I don't know how it all comes together to sound so incredible. And I don't know how many artists would hear their hired gun turn in a performance like that and go, oh, yeah, that's exactly what I was hearing in my head. Thanks, Marc. Oh, man. Frank's Wild Years also introduces us to Maurice Tepper, who had played with such left-field artists as Captain Beefheart and Frank Black. Maurice plays on Temptation, one of my absolute faves. Now, there are two clearly audible guitar parts, an overdriven five-chord figure, as well as that cool muted melody that hovers around the augmented fifth over the F minor chord. That's great. Now, I can't state with 100% confidence which part Morris plays, but if that muted isn't Marc Ribot, I'll go he. But then on I'll Be Gone, Morris does turn in a close approximation of what is now becoming a very identifiable style of guitar playing on Tom's songs. Those jagged single note lines. Now this is just part one. I'm going to have to do this in at least a couple of parts because there's a lot of ground to cover. Don't forget to thumb one in softly for me. Please subscribe and ring the bell so you know when the next one comes out. And feel free to share this around your Tom Waits loving friends who need a little bit of education on the litany of guitarists that have helped him along the way.